Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Red Hour, a show I do twice a week where I um, throw a little chaos into Star Trek by reviewing a random episode. Um, so I just want to say that obviously yesterday I wasn't able to really do an episode, and I wasn't able to really put out any sort of notice that I wasn't going to do the episode yesterday. Um, Due to work. And unfortunately, that happens from time to time. I was asked if I could work, and basically, well, I was sort of asked and told at the same time. So basically, it wasn't something I could really refuse, unfortunately, and that happens. And so, but today I'm going to do what would have been done. The episode, I'm going to review the episode that I would have reviewed um, yesterday. I'm also I also failed to show up Monday like I was going to and talk about Casino Royale because I completely forgot. So sorry for anyone that may have been expecting me to talk about Casino Royale. I'll try to do that uh, maybe at the end of this stream or Saturday. We'll see. Um, we'll see if anybody even shows up. And then tomorrow, I'm not going to be able to do my unplugged stream. I don't think, because I cut the tip of my thumb off the other day, Tuesday, and um, it's kind of hard to play guitar without that thumb. It's possible. It's possible. We'll see. Because that thumb holds the neck. So you got the neck and your fingers doing the strings and stuff. And your thumb is sort of like a stabilizer. But if it hits the wrong spot, the cut spot, it may not be possible to do. But we'll see. I can break out my electric guitar, which has a thinner neck, and it might be possible to do it that way. If I break the strings again, then I'm down for the count because I haven't had time to change the strings on the other one. Anyway, let's get into the show. I can barely hear myself for some reason. Uh, Michelle Ferry just showed up. Michelle, can you hear me fine? Because I can barely hear myself. Oh, I don't know. This streaming software that I started using, it sometimes doesn't. It, it turns down my headphones or whatever. I don't know how to explain it. You'd have to hear it yourself. But anyway, so today's episode we are talking about Enterprise Season 4, Episode 3, Home. That's where I left off. I didn't have a show yesterday because I had to work and there was no way to put in a notice to let people know that I wasn't going to do a show. So that's where we're at. And in Home, it starts off. A shuttle pod lands at Starfleet headquarters, and the crew, our main crew, gets out of the shuttle pod and Archer makes a speech, and this is at the end of. So the Azindi have been defeated, and then we had the two-part uh, season premiere, which was Admiral Teague was just talking about it last week. Stormfront, Stormfront, part one and two with the space Nazis that look like vampires and have makeup that's similar to like the Remans. So after that two parter, you get episode three, Home, where they come. They had time travel, time wimey shit. So then they come home to Earth, and Archer makes a speech, and he wants to thank. He says that people call him a hero, and he says that as far as his crew is concerned, I consider them heroes. But he also is concerned about the people that never made it. The 20, I think he said 27 crew members that died during this war, including the one that the Mako guy that the last time I talked about Enterprise, I was talking about him, and he had that was Countdown. There was Countdown, and then there's the Council. So I've done the Council, Countdown, and now this one. There was another Enterprise episode that I don't think was part of the Zindi arc. I don't remember. I got my little book here with all the episodes that I've done so far. I still need to print out the episodes and cross them off. Like Michelle Ferry, part of my think tank, suggested that I never would have thought of, or would have thought of like way down the road. Anyway, he says he ends his speech by "It's good to be home." Now, this is not your greatest captain speech in the world, but it gets the point across. I don't think Archer really ever had a really good captain speech like Picard or Cisco or Kirk, and I don't think Janeway ever really had a really good one. Maybe a few here and there, but nothing that stands out to me. But anyway, Archer walks into it, so that's the end of that teaser. We get the horrible, no good, terrible theme, which should have been Archer's theme, the song, the orchestral part that you hear at the end of the episode, of each episode. They call it Archer's theme. If you haven't heard it, go out and listen to it. That should have been the opening theme instead of that god awful song. But Archer walks into the bar. I forget what the name of this bar is, but we've seen it before. Is it called the Launching Pad? Is that what it's called? And a woman comes up to him, and it's Captain Hernandez, which, if you've seen Enterprise, she shows up, I think, in the third season. And she's a contemporary of Archer. She's about his same age. It's age appropriate for all the people that complain about that stuff nowadays. And she's promoted to captain. And so they have a drink, and oh, I almost forgot. He is also doing a debriefing, and she's in the room she's in there with them too, and he gets into this argument with Ambassador Saval, the Vulcan ambassador, and over, like, there's a couple missions that they're talking about. There's the one zombie Vulcan episode, which I forget the name of it, but they go over the events of that episode and how he didn't save the Vulcans, and he's complaining that the Vulcans didn't, during this Xindi crisis, he got more help from the Andorians than the Vulcans. And then Admiral, I think is it Admiral Forrest, um, tells him to calm down, and he keeps going off, and eventually the Admiral pulls him aside and tells him to take a vacation, and that it's an order. Meanwhile, on the Enterprise, T'Pol is in her quarters, and she's packing. She's getting ready to go to Vulcan, and Trip comes in to her room, or does the little dee dee, and he comes in, and he says that he wanted to work on the refit for the Enterprise, but Archer had ordered him to. He was ordered to take a vacation as well, and he is talking about how he doesn't want to go. He can't go to. There's no reason to go to Florida anymore. His sister's dead, and Florida's got a giant trench down the middle. Like in Superman, the new Corn Sweat Superman movie, Metropolis got a giant trench, and somehow it's repaired. It's magic, I guess. And then, so T'Pol suggests that he come with her to Vulcan, and she's going to go to her to visit her mom, and he says, well, how would you introduce me? Because at this time they've been getting it on and whatnot. And she says as Commander Trip Tucker. So then on the Columbia, which is the new NX, the NX-02, is under construction. They're finalizing the construction. Would have been nice if they had rushed that construction, wouldn't it have? During this war, you would think that they would, rush construction and prioritize that. But they don't. Enterprise has to be the main, leader of the fleet. Anyway, but they're going over. He's on Archer's there with Hernandez, and she's talking about all the upgrades that they've done at his recommendation, and he tells this story about when they first were about to launch the Enterprise. Captain Jeffries had recommended all these weapons and stuff, and he didn't think that was necessary because they're an exploratory ship, and I can only guess that Captain Jeffries is like a reference to Matt Jeffries, who designed the TOS Enterprise, and of course you have the Jeffries tubes, in TNG and others in TOS as well. But and he didn't think that turns out Captain Jeffries was correct, that they did need all these weapons and stuff. And so, like I said, Archer's, I kind of skipped over events a little bit. Archer's frustrated with Soval, and So back on the Enterprise, Captain Phlox is packing his. He's got his bags. He wants to visit Earth, and he's like carrying a ton of bags, like a woman. You know, women tend to carry a bunch of bags, or that's the joke. Um, and Reed is there in the corridor, and he asks Reed to help him with his bags, and he's talking about going to Earth, and he wants to visit. They're going to San Francisco and stuff, and Reed pulls a, "You sure about that?" And he's talking about how the Vulcans are hiding in the embassy. There's like because of the Xindi attack. There's been attacks on other aliens, Andorians. He mentions, and there's like a xenomorphic, not a xenomorph, xenophobic attacks, and like a spark of xenophobia going on. But Phlox isn't bothered by this and wants to proceed anyway. So, out in what I would presume is what looks to me like Northern California, in the Sierra ranges, is as Archer. He's on his forced vacation, and uh, he's going hiking. They call it climbing. He's doing a little bit of both, I guess. You have to hike to climb. And Hernandez shows up, and he's surprised, and he's like, "What are you doing here?" And she says, "Well, surely you can't. You wouldn't go climbing without a partner." And I think that they don't say any of this, but at first watching this, it's almost like they sent her there. Starfleet sent her there to keep an eye on him, but I think she just went on her own to keep an eye on him, because they say later on that they were in a relationship before and stuff like that. So back on it, so Vulcan, Trip and T'Pol show up to T'Pol's home, or her mom's home, and her mom shows up, and she introduces Trip, and then they start speaking Vulcan, and she's basically asking him, what are you doing? What is he doing in here? You've never brought a guest to stay with us, and blah blah blah." And she says that he's a colleague of hers. So she's kind of looking him up and down and assessing the situation. Um, then she says that, or T'Pol says that it's not even midday. Why aren't you at the Science Academy? And her mom says that she is no longer an instructor at the academy, and she sent a letter. And T'Pol says, "Well, we had problems, communications problems out in the expanse, so she never got the letter." And she also says that they had talked about her retiring in the past. So then her mom says that, um, "I'm not the only one that knows that you're here, you're back," and pulls out a letter that her fiance had sent to her. And I could have sworn that in that one episode of the original series where Kirk, the famous one where Kirk and Spock have to fight and stuff, and they have to go back to Vulcan, and Spock wants to basically annul his engagement. I could have sworn they had like a Vulcan term for that, because in TNG they have terms for a lawyer. In the case of Worf, or you know a on Bajor, a priest is called a Vedic. Stuff like that. I could have sworn that they just say fiance, and I was like, why didn't they just use a different, make up a term for that? Um, Stuff like that is kind of irritating, and I think Discovery does it too, or did it too. Um, so, but anyway, back, Archer and Hernandez are climbing. They're discussing. She wants to go over some of her crew picks for the Columbia, and discusses that some of them are members of his crew, and he she wants his input, and he's kind of basically doesn't want to talk about it, and so that's the way the episode is structured. You have these three storylines. You have Archer and Hernandez, T'Pol and Trip, and then the stuff going on with the xenophobic attacks on Earth. So it keeps bouncing back and forth between that. So back on Vulcan, you see T'Pol's mom ringing a bell, and Trip is in bed. He's in a guest room, by the way. And T'Pol knocks on the door and opens. He says, "Come in," and she comes in and says, "We have to do the breakfast, or prepare making a meal, the morning meal or whatever." Doesn't say breakfast. And he asks what time it is, and she says 0400, so 4 in the morning, or Earth time, I guess, or their time. I don't know, whatever. And she says that she tells her mom that during the morning meal, that that she was offered a Starfleet commission, and they argue over, because it's similar to like Spock going to Starfleet instead of the Science Academy or whatever. Similar like traditions, and they you would think that logic would dictate that you wouldn't have these type of traditions, but even Vulcans have their traditions. So back on Earth, Reed, Phlox, and Mayweather, or Gayweather, uh, are in that bar, that same bar, and some asshole dude comes up to them, starts talking shit about how Phlox is, I hope he's comfortable amongst all us humans, and starts just basically starts a fight, and Reed, leading up to the fight, you can see Reed getting mad, and Phlox is like, "Oh, why don't we just go?" And Reed says, "No, we'll just stay right here." And he's getting mad, and then Mayweather's also coming to his defense, and so then Phlox's face kind of puffs up like a blowfish, and they kind of get startled by that, and those guys leave. So back on Vulcan, Trip is working on some kitchen appliance that had broken down or something, that to Paul's mom, wasn't able to fix, and he's working on it. She comes in and she says that she knows about their relationship, and he says that he wasn't aware that he thought that T'Pol was not gonna say anything, and she says, "Well, I'm her mother. She didn't say anything. I'm her mother." And then T'Pol's fiance shows up, and T'Pol doesn't want. They go out to talk. T'Pol and him go out to talk, and she doesn't want to marry the guy. And the guy says that his family is very traditional, and they should stick with this tradition. And then she says that um, she's just adamant about not marrying him, and tells him, he says, "You should go." And as he's walking away, he says, "My family is very influential in the science academy, and could help your mother out." And she asks him what he means by that, and she says that, or he says that she was asked to resign instead of, her just, it was just her time to retire. And so then T'Pol's mom is meditating in another room, and T'Pol comes to talk to her, and they talk about the whole situation, and basically she had been falsely accused of bringing something home, and they were basically trying to get punished T'Pol, but they couldn't do that because she was on Enterprise and out in the expanse and stuff. So they went after her and her mom instead, and they blame T'Pol for what happened on P'Jem. So, for short recap, I think it was in season 1 or 2. There's a place called P'Jem that's like an Andorian. I don't know. It's like an Andorian, like monks or something. Or it's like a spiritual place, and but and the Andorians believed that they were using that place to spy on, that the Vulcans were using it. So maybe it's a Vulcan monastery. Maybe that's what it was. And yeah, that's what it is. And but underneath the monastery was a listening station that they uncovered. And Shran had taken hostages to basically prove his point. And I think this is when Archer first meets Shran. So T'Pol is being blamed for the discovery of P'Jem, which they shouldn't have been there in the first place, but whatever. So back with Archer, him and Hernandez are sleeping by the campfire, and he wakes up and hears a noise. And earlier, they had spotted like mountain lion tracks, so he's thinking maybe it's the mountain lion. And he grabs his phase pistol and starts to walk out in the woods. And it's late at night, it's dark, and he gets attacked by two Xindi. And then it turns out it was all just a nightmare. And he wakes up and Hernandez is there, and he's like getting ready to go climbing and go hiking. And he's getting all his gear. And she says that, "What are you doing? You can't go hiking at night. It's the middle of the night." And he says that he just wants to get away from her because she reminds him of him 3 years ago when he just wanted to be an explorer. He says that maybe the Vulcans were right. That humanity wasn't ready, and all this stuff, and he he's he's upset because of all the stuff that he did to win the war, including torturing people and other things. And he says he just wants to have that feeling again of like being an explorer. And she kisses him and says, well, maybe I can help you get back to that spot. So then T'Pol and back on Vulcan, T'Pol and Trip are visiting these ancient sites, and T'Pol tells Trip that she's going to go through with the marriage. And he says that you brought me 16 light years to tell me this. So then I'm wondering if that is correct math on that, or is that a contradictory statement? As I don't remember. I know it's been stated before how far Vulcan is from Earth, but I don't remember something I probably should have looked up. So anyway, back on Earth, Archer. The next day, Archer and Hernandez are hiking, and Archer points to a spot that they're trying to reach. That they're trying to reach a certain goal, and he had talked about how a couple nights prior he had pointed out to a star where there was a planet where they found their first M-class planet. Of course, it wasn't later on until T'Pol revealed what M-class Minchara class means. And I don't know that Hernandez would know that. So she should have been like, a what? A what type planet? But anyway, he's talking about this point, this spot on the mountain that reminded him of that planet. Very similar. I wonder why. Maybe it's because it's filmed in Northern California. So then that's where she mentions, why did we break up again? And he says, because you were, I was your superior. And she points out that he's not anymore. They're both captains. And then he gets some booty. Then we go back to on the Enterprise, and Hoshi's in the sick bay being checked for like parasites and stuff, and she wants Phlox to go to show him this restaurant that has like egg noodles and stuff, like a Chinese restaurant that he's been talking about for like 3 years, and he's kind of hesitant. He doesn't want to go down, and she says, well, that's not how you deal with racists and blah, blah, blah. And he says, well, somebody could get hurt and I don't want to cause any problems. So he asked her to bring some takeout back. Then we get back to Starfleet headquarters, and the debriefing resumes, and they basically finish up the debrief, and everybody walks away, and then Archer, as Saval is walking away, Archer apologizes to him and says that he shouldn't have got up in his face like that, and then Saval says that there was nothing you could have done about the Vulcans that you left behind, and that all the things you did, you had to do, you know. And then they shake hands and sort of make up, or you know, that's the end of that rivalry. Then back on Vulcan, Trip is getting ready for T'Pol's wedding. He's wearing um, her father's clothing, and T'Pol's mom comes in and talks to him about his feelings towards her and how she doesn't support like their relationship, but she thinks it would only be fair if he told her that he was in love with her, and that she needs to know all the facts before going through with this. And he says that he can't do that. So then they go to the wedding, and right before they're about to go through the ceremony and stuff, he tells her that she looks good, and then she says that she's pleased to see him there, and then kisses him on the cheek, and then that begins the ceremony and the ends the episode. And I would say it's a passable. It's a 6.5. It's a likable episode. I would have cut out the xenophobic stuff, but I know why they were doing it. They were setting up the Colonel Green stuff and the stuff towards the end of the season. And if there would have been a season 5, I guess it would have been fine to do all that, because then season 5 you can go into the Romulan War and so on, and go 5, 6, 7 on that way. That's what I was hoping for, and of course didn't happen. But what I did like about it, I liked all of the Vulcan stuff. Really hit home for me. Going back to the Vulcan for the first time in a long time, and just seeing a day in the life of a Vulcan, basically, on Vulcan, which we don't really get to see that much, if not any, really. And the romance between Archer and Hernandez was fine. She's attractive. She's again, if there was a season 5 and so on, that would have been a great storyline to pursue. And so to introduce that romance was good. I think Archer probably needed that sort of balance, because a lot of times in Quantum Leap he would have he has a female romance interest, and it kind of gives balance to Scott Bakula, because Archer is sort of all over the place, and he's he's bitter and he's angry. The war just ended, so I think they were going in the right direction, and it's unfortunate that it got cut off when it did, because I would have liked to have seen more of that and see where things go with T'Pol and Tucker, and having the Romulan War, and having T'Pol in, maybe not being in Starfleet, but be in some sort of role, so you still maintain the continuity with Spock. And yeah, I mean, I think that was a good. And I've heard Admiral Teague say this too, and he said it last week on his show, that this would have been a good first episode of season 4 instead of Stormfront and all that, but they used Stormfront to kind of end the temporal Cold War, which never got resolved, who Future Guy was, and Discovery tried his tried to throw some of that in there too, and towards the end, they were throwing pretty much, it's like watching No Time to Die, where they're trying to throw in every little Bond, tie up every little Bond loose end, and they still couldn't do it. They tried to say that Kovic was Daniels, and it was just kind of stupid. But that should be, Star Trek Discovery should be the tagline. It's just kind of stupid. That's the tagline for Star Trek Discovery. It's just kind of stupid. Anyway, let's see who's in the chat before we pick out the next episode. And like I said earlier, I was going to do a stream on Monday talking about, speaking of Bond, I was going to talk about Casino Royale, and I completely forgot. So I think I'm going to try to do it on Saturday night at 9. And let's hope I don't forget this time. I'll write it down. Saturday night, 9. Instead of the Enterprise watch party, I'll just watch, which would be this episode for Admiral Teague's. I've already got notes. I know what my thoughts on it, and so if I'm in the chat that night, I'll probably just repeat myself. But anyway, so we have, as I said, we had Michelle Ferry, we have DJ Play Nice. What's up, DJ Play Nice? Michelle thought this episode was a good one. I don't think they said the name for the bar in the episode home. No, they named the bar in another episode. There's an episode where Archer and his friend AJ are competing for, it's called First Flight, I think, and they're competing for captaincy of the Enterprise. So it's like it's a flashback episode, not like Shades of Grey flashback, but they're telling a story of from before we ran into Archer, and they named the name. I think it's called the Launch Pad. They named the name of that bar. And then we have Gavin Blackburn. Hello, Gavin Blackburn. Yeah, season 4 is definitely the best season and episode of Enterprise. And I think if they would have been able to go, get 7 seasons, they would have really connected it. They were really starting to connect it with TOS and making it a true prequel, like Better Call Saul. It's probably the only really good prequel out there that connects everything in a nice way to Breaking Bad while still having its own story too. And I think Enterprise had the potential to do that, but they cut it off too early, or they, and Gavin Blackburn also agrees that season 4 was they were getting it right. So anyway, let's go to the random episode generator, which is not on home. It's a Voyager episode. Of course it's a Voyager episode. But I'm going to randomize it. TNG. Season 4, episode 25, In Theory. Oh, that's the one where Data is dating that chick. And it doesn't work out. And I haven't done that one. So, Wednesday, I would be back for In Theory. Tomorrow night, as I explained earlier, I cut the end of my thumb off, um, which makes it still possible to play guitar, but your thumb is just sort of your stabilizer. So I'm probably going to attempt to still play guitar and do my unplugged uh, show tomorrow night at 9, and then Saturday night I'll do the uh, the Bond review, and then we'll go from there. And then I'll be back. The Red Hour will be back on Wednesday, next Wednesday. I don't think anything's going to interrupt that this time. So I want to thank Gavin Blackburn, DJ Play Nice, and Michelle Ferry for showing up. On anybody that's out there lurking, I'm going to start saying to please give a like and subscribe if you haven't already. I hate saying that, but you know, it does help. It's not showing that I'm streaming on my channel. Oh, that's why. Because of user error, that's why. Anyway, have a good night, everyone, and I will see you guys next time, and gals.